Let's have a look at this 1980s Pauline Trier statement sleeve. And I'm going to, I'm definitely looking at this one. And then also at some other ones. I think there's some sort of accent too. Enough maybe? I might have done it wrong. And if you didn't know about her, I didn't know much about her. Look her up. A lot of the stuff is very beautiful she makes. We're going to be working in black, so I hope you'll be able to see it. And Tata Kuli is saying, just want to say thank you. You're very welcome. I'm glad you're enjoying my tutorial. It's my pleasure. So let's have a look at this detail. This is from, I found it on a Google search. It's from a vintage website. And they sold it recently, and they sell for quite a lot of money, but you can understand why, because it's beautiful lines. Like the whole, I'm going to concentrate on the sleeves, but look at the lines. It's very flattering actually. I think with big sleeves like that, you always have to be careful that it doesn't become too overwhelming, but this is a beautiful silhouette, how it nips in. And it's nice as well because the sleeves are done in a silk, and then the body looks like it's either done in a crepe, and like the matte side, or in a wool. What do you, it's up to you really. So let's have a look at, so you can see it's 2 layers. Let's draw it out and see what it looks like. And if you have any questions, or if there's anything specifically you want me to look at, like for example construction or lining, then do let me know. I would, for this style, I would use my basic bodice block, or if you have a fitted moulage block, you can use that as well. So I'm just zooming in. Yeah, and it's definitely some sort of wool or silk crepe. What is quite interesting, can you see this? This is all black, so for you it just looks like a mess of black probably. But it's got a center front seam, and then the bust point is about there, and then our first sleeve starts here. But there is no shaping, so it's quite a big panel. So it's basically, it's not a skin tight fitted dress, and I'm going to show you why. Because if you think about your basic bodice block, the zoom in like that. I want to see the center front. If you think that's the center front seam, and then you can see that's probably around here, and then it goes like this. So you can see there's this much of shaping we can't use. We can transfer the shaping from the bust and from the waist start into our center front and into this seam, but we're gonna lose a little bit of a bust shaping. So it's actually not skin tight, it's sort of skimming, so it's probably really comfortably to wear dress. And Jen, hi Jen, lovely to have you here. It's just saying she can see the detail even if it's black, so that's good, because I was a bit worried. I never normally do black, and I think my iPad is also slightly dirty. I'm not going to attempt to clean it because it's quite temperamental, but I will clean it for next time. And hello Natalie, lovely to have you as well. And everybody else who's watching. So let's actually start drafting it and drawing it out. So we got a center front seam, which is going to help us with our shaping. And then you can see the neckline actually opens up a little bit. So that I would be tempted, and I'd be interesting what you all say, I'd be tempted to actually just draft this straight. So you literally just have a straight line on the front, but then you leave it open to around here, because I think gravity will automatically open it and give you a V-neck detail. So I would try that out, and then if it's too close, then you can shave something off. But I think this might literally just be the center front and open ups, or otherwise you then just like shave off however much you need. But for your first trial, I would actually try it with just the straight center front. But either way works. I mean, of course, the back is just a normal. I've drawn it the wrong way around. You can see I'm a bit. There you go. The back looks like that, just completely straight. It's probably got a center back or a side seam zip. Either one would work. I think a lot of these styles from the 80s have a center back zip. And the dress itself. Let's get the whole one. Yeah, it's a nice length. And then it's got this really nice, like a princess seam, but moved slightly to the side. Yeah, and no waist seam. So you got this, and then I'm actually gonna just draw how I think the dress looks first of all, and then draw in the sleeve details. So let's move it slightly over. And I'm glad you're all liking this style as much as I do. So the actual dress underneath, I think probably looks something like this. So it's got like a princess line. But as I said, the princess line doesn't go through our bust point. It goes slightly to the side, so you can't do you basically have to shorten your bust out. So it's a sort of, you can use your basic dart manipulation, but rather than pivoting everything at the bust point, you move it back. And I'm going to talk about that on Saturday when I show you how to draft it. It should be on YouTube at 8 PM UK time. But what we're basically going to do is we're just going to lose a little bit of shaping by moving back the pivot point of our bust dart, and then the waist dart we're just gonna do the same sort of shaping, but I would probably move it into the center front. So I think the center front goes in a bit and then out again, and then the other shaping we're going to put in that slightly sidelined princess seam. And Natalie saying this design takes me back this this is what you call in Australia flange. Yeah, I didn't know what to call it. It's like a because it's not a ruffle, it's sort of a, I don't know, actually I'd love to know what would you call this sort of type of sleeve. Like it's a flared detail. And Natalie says leather jacket with a detail. That sounds beautiful. And I've seen like slightly smaller versions like this quite a lot recently, set into sleeves. And Jen says exactly the same. She had a leather jacket like that. So it is very 80s, but I think it's late 80s, early 90s, but it's very beautiful and very timeless to a certain degree, because it has sort of the feeling of a mid-century as well. So now I'm just going to look at the side a bit, and you can see the first insert, or whatever I can't even pronounce, flange, is like this, and it has no gathers, it's just set in like that. So what you literally do is you take a piece of paper and you lay it on, and that continues to the back. And the second one, in this case, Dior does a detail like that quite often, and Dior always adds it into this sort of slightly into this sort of princess line, and then you have a side panel which is one piece. But here the second sleeve detail is actually set into the side seam, which is quite interesting. So I'm going to show you a different option in a second. And I think they might be exactly the same, just set in to different seams, or there might be slightly different shapes, and you would literally try that out, whether you need a slightly different angle. And all it is, it's basically, it's a bit like a gusset, but we're folding it. So each sleeve looks like, I think looks like that. And then this is your fold line, which is the edge of it. And when you basically fold it and you stitch it in, but the exact shape, the easiest way to find it out is actually to put our trowel on the mannequin and find out. So let's have a quick look at the side. Well, let's have a look at the back first. And I'm going to finish off, I'm going to show you a few different options. So actually I should have gotten the back view, because when I could have told you what it definitely looks like rather than my guesswork. But if you've watched me a few times, you know I quite enjoy figuring out in my head, but also I think it's like, in the end you can make it how you want to. So I'm not, there's some people out there who make amazing accurate costumes. I like to know how things work, but then you have to make it how to fit yourself in the end, rather than fit around the clothes. So I think as a maker and designer, your interpretation and what you want to wear it in the end is what matters. And I've sort of drawn it, probably has like a armhole shape. I didn't draw it very well. So that again is our back. So the front, I'm going to draw the side in a second, because this is where it can be quite interesting. And I think the back on this one looks exactly the same as the front. So that's why it's like a softened diamond. Oh, and Natalie's making a great comment. She's saying it reminds me of the elegant, oh god, I'm really tired, sorry, elongated sleeve hats on men duplex from the 16th centuries. And that's true, it's a very historical detail, and that's of course what is beautiful about fashion design, is that you can take a historical detail, and I'm going to show you which one Natalie means. I think I've got an image of this. So this is a great book called The Evolution of Fashion, and it's got lots of drawings. Oh, there you go. Oh my goodness, that was pure luck. Can you see? This is much smaller. Is that the one you mean? It's 1605. Can you see on the men's and actually the ladies? They both have that sort of detail, but slightly smaller. So that's what Natalie means. And Natalie makes Natalie C's sauce. She makes very beautiful costumes. So have a look at her. And look there. Let's call it an epaulette, because I think that's look. And it's literally, that's a weird shape. And you can see there isn't actually pointed. And you can see how it actually gets bigger. This is a bit of a trip through history. You can see this is now 1610, so 5 years later, and it becomes a bit bigger. And this, of course, I'm no historian, and that gets really big. Charles I, 1625. I'm no historian. I come from a design background, but looking at history, you can pick the big bits you want, whether you then make costumes or whether you make designs like I do. And if you like that book, it's Evolution of Fashion by Margaret Hamilton Hill and Peter A. Bucknell. So thank you, Natalie. So And on all of these, the historical ones, they literally get stitched into the armhole. On this one, it's sort of quite interesting. It's sort of stitched either into the side seam, or what I would do, which I think will give it a more 3D look, is if we draw our side seam, and bear with me because my side seams aren't very good. So if that's my armhole, yeah, and then we've got our princess line, and then we got our center front and our center back, yeah. That is a really bad drawing. And then we've got into our princess line, we've got our epaulette there, and then I think the blue, the lower epaulette, actually doesn't go into the side seam, but I think instead the side seam has been replaced with a seam slightly to the front and a seam slightly to the back. So instead of a side seam, we got a seam basically here, maybe about 1.5 inches on the side seam. So that side panel, I would make it a minimum of 2 inches or 5 centimeters. Otherwise it looks too mean, I always think. And then the second seam is there. And by doing it like that, your bottom epaulette basically runs into these, runs around the armhole and then into the front and the back seam. So your whole dress looks something like that. So let's just quickly sketch out the panel pieces. So you got your and I'm gonna show you how to draft this on Saturday. So do join me on YouTube at 8 o'clock. So it's something, it's actually, it's where you start chopping off your block into lots of thin pieces. And so that this is when like your side panel, then this is really badly drawn, but you basically get like a really thin panel dress, and then you just insert your epaulettes where you want it. But that actually means by just paneling up, it's actually really easy to make. To replace all shaping with seams, and that means you can quite subtly shape it. So I think, for example, so the bust shaping we're just gonna put into this panel here. So we're gonna put the shaping into here from the bust line, and then our waist shaping, we have 1, 2, 3 seams. We can actually distribute our waist shaping and make it, that's why it's probably a really flattering style, because it sort of just runs smoothly. It's not super tight, it just skims the body really nicely. And I'm going to talk about a bit more about how we're first of all going to create this style, and also the epaulettes, how you can do them on Saturday. But I also wanted to show you how you can, like, even if you don't like this style, how you can actually use the same way of using an epaulette on lots of different styles as well. And Natalie says the seams are great for fitting. Yeah, and I think that is totally true, because the more seams you have, the more precise your fitting can be. So you really can split it up. So you only thing you're a bit with a style like that, you're a bit limited because you haven't got any seam here. So if you wanted to have a super bodycon dress, for example, if you wanted to have the skin tight, you can't, because there's no fitting there. So when I first looked at it, I wasn't sure, but if you look closely at the fabric, you can see there's no darts or anything to that sort of central panel. So so you can do lots of very sort of subtle fitting around the waist and stuff, but you can't have a super tight bust point basically, which is fine. It's different styles. I want to quickly show you another Pauline Triguer. This is, I like this because it's basically the same technique but moving down the body, and it's not a very good photo, so I apologize. But can you see it's like a boat neck dress, like a little, it's a slightly shift dress, but then again they've created seams again, but this time instead of it coming from shoulder, there's probably a seam going like that, and then she's put in the epaulettes again at different heights. So again, it's like, it looks like you basically, your whole body is the bow, and then this is like your sort of imaginary knot, and then the two sides of the bow come around, and this time it's gathered. So with these epaulettes, what's really nice is they're literally just smooth, and then it's just the angle of your shape, which basically can make everything, like from this, you know, it can change the angle at the top to how it looks depending on the angle you have on the, here, the shape you have. But here she's added gathers as well, so it's double 3D, and it's either, yeah, it's probably like a nice seam coming through here and then through there, which goes then in a straight line down and adds shaping. Alternatively, it might even be that it's literally top stitched, but it's, again, it's just using the sort of folded, and in this case gathered shapes to create a real statement shape, which is, but it's really easy to draft. And I wanted to show you one last one, and I'm gonna talk about construction in a second, and then I'm gonna finish for today. So this is another Pauline Triguer, and here you can see she's again used the same technique where you insert basically volume into seams. Just this time she's basically created like a sailor collar or a Peter Pan collar, but with lots of volume, and there might be a seam, yeah, there's a seam here, so there's like she's elongated that shape, but then she's again just created probably a second line, you can see it's around here, a second seam where she's added more shaping. So you get these sort of layers of shape, which is geometric shapes, but by adding them into a seam and layering with a little bit of distance between, you get these really interesting, quite sculptural statement charges, but which are just so with this style, it's literally it's probably, you would have to, again, I would get a piece of paper and lay it on. I think the shape is maybe, actually I think it's actually like the fabric would basically guide you how it looks like. I think it's like this, because it drops down, but just by having that in different layers, it's like a handkerchief basically. But you can experiment with that by having like different shapes and putting into seams and then working out what happens. So let's quickly finish with talking about construction quickly of this dress. Oh, I'll show you one last one before I do so. This one. So this is similar, but this time they've used a shape like this, and they've made it go all around the neckline, and then it actually there's a second one into your armhole. But it's all about just using really simple shapes, whether that's our epaulette shape, which is folded over, whether that's I always forget it's a ruffles, and I always forget the difference between the two. If you know me, I am not very good with terms, and each country has different names. But whether it's like a half moon shape, whether it's a shape like that and you fold it, whether you actually, if you use a shape like this, and then force that open onto a straight, then you actually end up with a shape with all these gathers here. So where you're forcing it, and I think that might be the black dress we looked at. So by shaping it open, these two pointy bits actually sort of drape down like a handkerchief. So that's what I sort of love about, if you just get a well-fitted dress and then you're trying a sweet little black dress, like a sort of quite cute, but it's very, very elegant actually, classic black dress, and you add your oversized epaulettes for a real statement. Let's quickly finish off by talking about construction. So as I said, I think that is a really beautiful wool crepe, and if you zoom in you can really see the detail. And of course you got the silk there. These are on fold, so they just literally, you don't have to any edging on there. I think there's probably a facing like that. And then the back probably has a zip, so either a zip all the way to the top. Alternatively, you can also do a side seam. You can do a side seam zip. Either way would work. And then the hem probably has to have a, well, if it's wool, you can steam in your facing. You can do attached facing and so steam it into the curve, or do a separate one. I would imagine that dress probably had a, might even be lined. So you could either have a facing in wool and then line the whole thing in a silk. It all depends. I would imagine if it's like a nice, it's quite expensive evening dress, it probably be lined. So it just looks smoother. And also of course when you can, if you have lining, you can hide all the seams and stuff, so just have really neat inside. But it's quite easy to construct. You just press and fold your epaulettes, and then they just get stitched, sandwiched into the seams, and then the rest is just like a normal princess seam construction. So thank you everybody for joining me for this analysis of statement sleeves from 1600 to the 1980s. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll be back on Saturday with a live drafting tutorial on YouTube, so do please join me there.